Hello everyone and welcome back to another Luminar NEO tutorial. In today's video, we're gonna look at the blending modes available in this photo editing application. We're gonna start by looking at the definition of the blending modes, and then we're gonna look at the practical use of the blending modes in photo editing. So if you're ready, let's start right now. Okay, so let's dive into the application where we're gonna be looking at our blend modes. To completely start, I am here in the edit module. I have a sample file, and looking at our layers panel, we have the original image and I have one layer on the top of it. Right now it's hidden. However, if I right click on it and click on show layer, it will appear. So I simply have two layers on the top of each other. I have the photo with the lady and this layer with the overlay. I can of course move them around by dragging them around, but more importantly, what I can do, I can select the layer on the top, then move into our main editing panel where I'm gonna go into the layer properties, and here in the properties tab, under the opacity adjustment, I can click on a gray drop-down box where I can go through all the different blend modes available in the application. By default, the blend mode will always be on normal. However, there are other blend modes available. And similarly to other photo editing applications, you can just hover over the different blend modes and immediately you see a preview on what is the blend mode going to do to the image. So coming back to the explanation or definition of the layer blend modes, where the blend modes in Luminar NEO and many other photo editing applications control the way the layers interact with each other. So one more time, two layers, then I have the layer on the top selected, I am adjusting the blend mode, and as you can see, by hovering over and selecting different blend modes, I'm adjusting the way they interact with each other. Now in this specific tutorial, we will cover 6 of the most important blend modes that we all going to use in almost 99% of the editing. However, if you're interested in more blend modes, we will cover them in future videos. So, one more time, to access the blend modes, you need to have a layer selected in the editing panel, have the layer properties open, and the adjustment or change to the blend modes can be done in a gray drop-down box under the opacity slider in the properties tab. So for this specific image, looking at this kind of overlay texture, what we would do, we would click again on a gray drop-down box, hover over, select something like screen, then adjust the opacity down because it's a little bit too strong. So to get something like this, maybe even flip the overlay and then continue with the edit while having this extra effect and extra depth to the image. By the way, if you want to follow me along with all the examples I'm going to be showing you today, then make sure that you jump into the description of this video, click on the link there and download the sample files now. So jumping straight into it, we're going to start with the first and the most common blend mode that is called normal. Earlier, I already mentioned that that's the default blend mode used in the application anytime you add new layer. So one more time, we are in the edit module. Looking at our layers panel, we have a white background or simple white layer at the bottom of our layers. Then we have this element here and another element on the top of it. We can again shift the order of the layers if we want to. However, for the time being, let's just leave the orange layer on the top and the blue at the bottom. So now turning our attention towards the layer properties, where looking at the blend mode, again, you can see that we are on normal. We are on normal for the blue element or the circle as well as the orange element. Again, normal here. So when I take the orange and hover or move it over the blue, you can see that it completely covers the part I am covering. So coming back to the definition of the normal blend mode, This is the most basic blend mode where the layers behave like two pictures on the top of each other. So basically, it just covers each other completely without any additional effects. If I would make the layer on the top bigger, I could completely cover the layer under. Now, the only adjustment you can make to this blend mode is the opacity. So, while we having the orange element selected, we can go back to layer properties where we can adjust the opacity from 100 to whatever we want. We can go completely to 0 to make it disappear, or we can adjust it and let's say go for something like 50. After that, again, we can shift it around and that's it. So one more time, with the normal blend mode, the two elements or the two layers interact with each other like two pictures on the top of each other. The only adjustment we can make to it is the adjustment to opacity. And now, since we understand the normal blend mode, it's time to move on to something a little bit more interesting. The next blend mode we're gonna be talking about is the multiply. So the multiply blend mode is very popular in photography or photo editing. And the reason is that it can be used on many different tasks. Now, one thing that you need to remember about the multiply blend mode is that it darkens. And that's really it. That's all you need to remember. The multiply blend mode darkens. So back to our editing module. We have two images here. We have the landscape at the bottom and this quite cool graphic where we have 100% black, 100% white, 50% gray, and then the gradient in between. So what we're gonna do, we have the layer selected and we're gonna change the blend mode from normal into the multiply. Once we do that, you will notice multiple different things. The completely dark part of our gradient stays. What it means is that everything that will be 100% black will remain on the image without change when using the multiply blend mode. On the top of it, everything that is 100% white or 0% black will basically disappear. So everything that will be completely white will disappear. And everything in between, every percentage of the gray or brightness in between will darken the image. So how can we use that in photo editing? Well, if the multiply blend mode darkens, we can use it for darkening. So what we're gonna do, we have another sample file ready. We're gonna go into the layers panel, right click on it and select duplicate layer. With the layer on the top duplicated, we're gonna go into layer properties, click on normal and change it into the multiply. Immediately, you can see how it makes it much darker. However, it doesn't look that great, right? It's a little bit too dark. Well, to adjust it, it's very simple. We're just gonna adjust our opacity. So let's say that we're gonna go to somewhere around 70%. Now, I'm still not crazy about it. Some parts are still too dark. So now what we can do, we can turn our tab into masking, select the brush. In the brush, we're gonna click on erase as we're gonna erase a specific part of the layer. Now adjust the strength down to, let's say, 40 and keep the softness on 100. Now you can use the bracket keys on your keyboard to adjust the size. And now let's go ahead and just paint or brush over the areas where we don't wanna apply the darkening or not as much of it. So let's say over the bridge here in this part, maybe also over the smoke, something like this. And basically what we're doing is a little bit of dodge and burn. So once we're done with it, what we can do, we can have a look at the before and after. And actually it adds a really nice amount of drama or interest. So I really like it. Let's have a look one more time, before and after. So you can use the multiply blend modes to darken your image by simply duplicating the layer, turning the blend mode from normal into the multiply, adjusting the opacity, and then using masking to apply it to the specific part of your photo. Moving on through the examples of using the multiply blend mode, I was thinking about the old way of doing the sky replacements on the photo. Now, of course, we have the Sky AI available, and it's much easier than using any selections or blend modes. However, from time to time, there can be a situation or an image where maybe the amount of the sky is really small, so the tool can't recognize it, or it's very specific where you want to be able to adjust it manually. So how was it done in the past? Well, we have our original image, and now we need to bring our sky. So we're going to click on the plus sign. I actually already have one of the skies here, so we're going to click on it and add it. Once we have it added, we can stretch it around. So we're just going to position it over the horizon, something like this. Of course, make it much bigger. And again, shift it up so it kind of match the scene. Once we have it there, what we're going to do, we're going to go back to layer properties, increase the opacity, and again, change the blend mode from normal into the multiply. So that is actually done already. What we're going to do, we're going to shift it a little bit lower, somewhere around here, and that's that. Now, when I hit enter, you can see that it did pretty decent job over the sky. However, there is that strong or hard edge, and there is also a little bit of the sky leaking through the tower. Well, what we can do, it's really simple. Again, open layer properties, maybe shift it down even more, and then go into the masking, brush again, erase, strength, well, let's go for 60%, stay on softness with 100, and the size, again, you can use your bracket keys or the slider to adjust it, but let's start with around 100. Now, what we're gonna do, we're just gonna brush over the hard edge here at the bottom of the sky. And we're gonna continue brushing until the edge disappears. So, something like this. And then just keep doing it until you're happy with the result. Now let's make it a little bit smaller, increase the strength to, let's say, 80. And what we can do, we can just click at the beginning of the line, hold shift and click at the end. And that will pretty much remove the line completely. Well, there is maybe still a little bit over the mountain here. So that was a little bit too much. So adjust the strength down and just make it blend in a little bit more naturally. Coming back to our tower here, let's zoom in using Command or Control plus. Once we have the brush selected, hit the spacebar on your keyboard and move around. And now, while we're still on erase, we can go ahead and very basically remove the sky from the actual image. So yes, you could do much better selection. You could remove the sky from the roof and better from the tower. However, this is the old way of doing the sky replacement. Now, one thing that is important to remember for this is that this old way works the best when there is really simple or bright sky. Again, coming to the blend mode itself, since it's a little bit darker and it has all these shades of gray in it, it blends much better when the sky is simple and it's as bright as possible. And finally, with the third example of using the multiply blend mode, we're going to be using the learning or the fact that we now know that the white in the image completely disappears and black doesn't change at all when using the multiply blend mode. Well, what does it mean? Well, we have this image here, this lovely tower of the castle, and on the top of it, I already have an overlay or an image which, if I increase the opacity, is pretty much just a blown out sky with dark birds on it. So, what it means, now when I turn the blend mode into multiply, the white should disappear and the black should stay. So, let's have a look at it. Let's go ahead and again go into layer properties, where again we're gonna change the blend mode from normal into the multiply. Once we do that, we can now adjust the size of this layer and position it, well, let's say over the tower, somewhere around here. This is maybe still a little bit too big, maybe somewhere here. Don't worry about the fact that some of the birds are over the tower. We can fix that in a moment. And that's about it, right? Now we can close the layer properties and move on. But actually, no, it doesn't blend well together. And what do you think is the reason? Well, the reason is that the white on this image, on this layer, isn't completely white. It's not 100% white, so it must be a little bit gray. And that's the reason why it doesn't blend completely. Well, what we can do? We have still the layer with the birds selected, and now we need to move into the essential section where we're gonna open the develop tool. We're gonna close the light and we're gonna open the curves. Now, adjusting the blending, most of the time, all you need is this little line at the bottom with the 3 dots on it. To adjust it, what we're gonna do, we're gonna take the point all the way on the right, focusing on the highlights, and we're just gonna drag it down. By doing that, by crashing down the highlights, you can see how we're now blending it completely with the image. So just like that, now we have birds on our image without the white background. So what we can do, we can close the develop tool, back to the layer properties, and here, as I mentioned, some of the birds are over the tower. So we're gonna go into the masking, select the brush. With the brush selected, again, we're gonna click on erase because we want to erase these birds. Adjust the strength. No, we're gonna keep the strength on 100. Adjust the softness down to, let's say, 20. And now very easily just brush over the birds. With that being done, we can zoom back out and we are finished. Okay, so back to this image, which can mean only one thing, and that's that we're gonna talk about another blend mode. This time, we're gonna talk about the complete opposite of multiply, and that's the screen blend mode. Well, as I mentioned, the screen blend mode is the opposite of the multiply blend mode. The only thing you need to remember about it is that it brightens. So now when we go into the blend modes and change it from normal into the screen, we get the complete opposite of multiply. The 100% blacks disappear, the 100% white stay completely without any change, and everything in between, all the different shades of gray and brightness, brighten the image. Well, since we understand that, let's have a look at some examples of what we can do with it. So moving to this example, since you already see how we can use the multiply blend mode to darken image, I also want to show you how we can use the screen mode to brighten it. So we have this beautiful model here, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna duplicate the layer, then make sure that we have the layer on the top selected, then move into layer properties where, as you guessed it, we're gonna change the blend mode from normal into the screen. And just like that, it brightened it. But I think it's way too bright. So to adjust it, first of all, let's bring the opacity down. Let's say to somewhere around 70. And one more time, let's use masking. In this case, I think it's too bright everywhere. So what we're gonna do again, we're gonna go into the brush. This time, stay on paint, adjust the size, and again, go somewhere around 50. I think that all we want to brighten is the face and maybe some of the other elements of the model. So one click will basically remove the mask or the layer from the entire image, and it will start to appear only in the areas where we're going to brush. So like the face, maybe the hat, and maybe a little bit of the dress. If we want, we can also brighten some of the other areas like the tables here and do that. But that part is completely up to you. So you just saw me using the screen blend mode to brighten the image. However, in 99% of the time, you're gonna be using the screen blend mode for overlays. For the traditional overlays, where you have an overlay on a black background, you drag it on your image, change the blend mode, the black will disappear, and you will see the incredible magic. Now I will show you that in 1 second. However, I want to mention that on our YouTube channel, we have a complete guide for how to use the layers panel as well as overlays. So I will link them in a corner of the screen now, as well as in the video description. So that way you can continue learning and focus on this part of the editing if you're interested in it. However, as I promised, an example of using the overlay. So we have this beautiful night scene of the cityscape. We're gonna go back to the layers panel, click on the plus sign and select the moon here. Once the moon appears, what we can do, we can increase the opacity all the way to 100 and change the blend mode from normal into the screen. And just like that, now the black disappears. We can adjust the size and position it over the tower. Let's say here. We can make it a little bit more natural, or we can go crazy and have a really big moon. So let's go crazy. Let's go for the big moon, just like this. Here, again, don't worry that it's over the building. We can fix that in a moment. And that's almost it. However, looking at it, well, the black disappeared, but we lost lots of details in the moon. So what to do with it? Well, similarly to the bird example, in the multiply blend mode, we can use the curves option to basically adjust the amount of white and black in our layer and get different levels of blending. So we have the moon selected and we're gonna go into the develop tool. In the develop tool, again into the curves, where we're gonna be using again the dots at the bottom. This time we're gonna take the dot all the way on the left and basically just shift it up. And by doing that, you can see how we're getting more or less of the moon. It's up to us. And again, we can take also the point on the right and shift it around. And by doing so, if you shift it a lot, you will see that the blending of the moon will start to disappear, or the opacity of the moon will start to be less and less visible. So if I really shift it, let's say all the way here, it's pretty much not transparent at all. However, it's a little bit too bright, so let's bring it down somewhere, I think for me, around here. Once we have this done, again, we can close the develop tool, turn back or come back into layer properties, where we now want to adjust the masking. So in the masking, again, back to brush, zoom in a little bit. When zoom in, what I like to do quickly is to adjust the opacity so we can see the building behind. This time, make sure that you on erase, softness down to 5, and let's zoom in even further. Use the bracket keys to adjust the size. One click on the top, shift or hold shift and one click at the bottom. That will create a straight line. One click on the top again and shift to create another straight line. And this way, pretty much do the full selection of the building. Once the edges are done, then it's really simple to remove it. Zoom in a little closer to take care of the sharp edge. Again, don't forget using the space bar to move around when you have a brush tool selected. And maybe if I zoom back out and increase the opacity in the properties, that's that done. So just like that, we have a new moon on our image with using the screen mode with the overlay with the black background. By the way, just before we going to continue, I want to quickly remind you that this tutorial is powered by our incredible Luminar NEO Power Bundle. This best-selling bundle of tools specifically designed for Luminar NEO includes everything from your skies, overlays, presets, textures, backgrounds, layers, LUTs, and so much more. Now, if you want to find out more about it, then visit our website at cleverphotographer.com, and to get the best possible price, simply follow the link in the description of this video. Okay, now we have covered the normal, multiply, and screen blend mode, and it's time to look at the overlay and soft light blend modes. And the reason why we're gonna talk about both of them at the same time is that they are quite similar. Well, while multiply blend mode was focusing on darkening, screen blend mode on brightening, the overlay and soft light will be focusing on contrast. Well, again, we are on our familiar image where we have the landscape at the bottom and the gradient on the top. Well, you know what to do. Click on the blend mode drop-down box and let's go ahead and select the overlay. By doing that, you can see what happened. Well, if you can't see, let me tell you. The middle, where we have a 50% of the gray, 50% of the brightness, doesn't change at all. Remember, for the screen blend mode, it was the white. For the multiply blend mode, it was the black. Well, for the overlay and soft light, it's the middle, the 50% gray that stays exactly the same. But after this, what happens? Where everything that has more than 50% of the brightness, so we're going towards this direction, brightens the image. So you can see the gray here brightens it a little bit and the white even more. So that's 50% of the brightness or gray, and going brighter, that part of the layer will brighten the image. Where on the opposite, everything that has less than 50% of the gray or it's darker than 50% will darken the image. So as you can see, everything on the right brightens, everything on the left darkens. And coming back to the basic explanation of contrast, well, you're making the bright areas brighter and the dark areas darker. So if that's the case, what's the difference between the overlay blend mode and Softlight blend mode? Well, actually, there is not much difference at all. They both do exactly the same. However, the Softlight does it with lower intensity. So look at the image. When you look at it with the overlay blend mode, you can see how the dark areas are getting really dark and the bright areas really bright. Where if we use the Softlight, you can see that it's a little bit more gentle. It's not that dark and it's not that bright. So that's really the only difference between the overlay and Softlight. And of course, depending on the situation, depending on your layers and the different images, you will simply choose between the two. Well, now, since we understand what the overlay and Softlight does, let's have a look at some examples. Now coming back with another sample file, you could already guess what we're going to do. Well, if with the first blend mode we were darkening the image, with the second blend mode we were brightening it, well, with this blend mode we're gonna add contrast. Well, you know what to do. Right click on the original photo, duplicate it, then make sure that you have the top layer selected and change the blend mode from normal into the overlay or Softlight. It is really up to you what you want to choose, overlay or Softlight. Let's go for the Softlight on this image right here and take the opacity slider and bring it down. That's all you need to do. Just simply adjust it to your liking. Once you're done with that, we can again have a look at the before and after. And as you can see, just like magic, very quickly and very easily, we can add contrast using the Softlight or overlay blend mode in our layers panel. While adding a contrast to the image is a great way of using these two blend modes, most of the time you're going to be using them is to add textures or overlays to your photo. Well, we have this example here of this beautiful model and we have two layers on the top of it. Both of them are hidden, but let's go ahead and unhide the first one by right-clicking on it and selecting Show Layer. Now, the new layer will appear on the top. You can see it's a lovely texture with the scratches and with a brighter area in the middle. So, what we're gonna do, back to Layer Properties, click on the blend mode and change it from normal into the overlay or soft light. Again, up to you. Well, for me, the overlay actually works a little bit better and it creates this beautiful scene. So it adds the character to the image by applying these different scratches and imperfections, and at the same time, it adds really nice vignette around and brightens the center. Let's have a look at it. If I hide it, you can see the before, and if I unhide it, you can see the after. And I think it's beautiful. Really, really nice result. To show you another example, let's hide this layer and open the layer on the top, which is more like that warm canvas. And again, let's select it, blend mode from normal into overlay or soft light. Well, I think for this one, maybe the soft light will work a little bit better. We can bring down the opacity if we want. And if we don't like what it does to the face of the model, we can very easily select the masking, again go on brush, click on erase, adjust the strength to, let's say, somewhere around 60, and easily just brush over the face to make sure that it doesn't, or the new texture doesn't cover it. At the same time, we can do the same for the hands. Keep adjusting the size of the brush so everything looks good, and very easily do something like this. Zooming out, and quickly let's have a look at the before and after. So coming back to it, the overlay and soft light blend modes offering the opportunity to add contrast or create a contrast between the two layers, and those are the blend modes most often used for adding textures and overlays to your photos. And finally, to finish it off, the sixth blend mode we're gonna be talking about is the color. Now, compared to the other blend modes, color blend mode doesn't adjust anything else other than the color between the two layers. So I have this green apple here, and I have a pure red layer on the top of it. Let me show you, let me unhide it, just like this, red layer. What we're gonna do? Well, we're gonna go into the layer properties, where first of all, we're gonna change the blend mode from normal into the color. As you can see, it takes the layer under and add the red color to it. Now, because the background isn't completely white, it adds a little bit of yellow. However, you can see that it just changes the color. Let me show you before and after. And when you look at it, it doesn't adjust any brightness or anything else on that image, just the color. Well, if we want to see it a little bit easier, we can go into masking, mask actions, invert the mask, and simply select the brush, and now just paint over the apple itself. So that way we don't have the distraction of the background. So just like this, you can color the apple. However, to be honest, there are much more powerful and easier way to color something in your images, and we have a set of tutorials on our YouTube channel on how to do that. And again, just like earlier, I will list them into the description of this video, and also my favorite will be added in a corner of your screen now. When it comes to the practical use of the color blend mode in photo editing, there are many different ways on what you can use it for. However, one of my favorite is to use it to remove the heavy chromatic aberration from your photos. Now, zooming in, you can see this heavy purple or sometimes green line on the edges of the contrasty elements, which is often caused with the direction of the light for your lens or the lens itself. So you can see heavy purple and heavy green. So how to remove it? Well, what we need to do first is to duplicate the layer. And while we have the top layer selected, instead of changing the blend mode immediately, we need to go down into the creative section of our toolbar, and here open the blur tool, select the Gaussian blur, and increase the amount until you pretty much can't see the color. So for me, I think it's around 7 or 8. I think 8. Once we have it done, we can close the blur tool, and now finally go back to the top, open the layer properties, and change the blend mode from normal into the color. And just like that, the chromatic aberration is gone. So now when we zoom out, and let's say that we zoom to another area, like right here, it all disappeared. Let me show you before, when we hide the layer, where you can see lots of the color here and here. And again, let's move around towards this area where you can see it a lot on the edge of the house. And when we apply it, it disappears just like that. And just like that, we are finished with today's tutorial. If you enjoyed it, make sure that you give it a like, and also don't forget to ask any questions about today's tutorial or Luminar NEO in overall in the comment section of this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our future content. For today, my name was Jacob Bors, and I already can't wait to see you in the next video.